Hi everyone, and welcome to today's In Focus BU webinar called Are You Ready? Maintaining a Mentally Healthy Community When Change is All Around. My name is Amelia Joyce and I work for Early Childhood Australia, as do my other panellists that are joining us today, Maria Hennon, Katie Brennan and Maria Curtis. So we've got some tongue twisters in people's names today. We've got two Marias in the room, so we'll see how that plays out. But I think we should be able to get that covered. BU is a national mental health initiative and it's led by Beyond Blue in partnership with Early Childhood Australia, who we all work for, and Headspace. The initiative itself is funded by the Australian Government. We aim through BU to transform Australia's approach to supporting children and young people's mental health in their early learning services and their schools. Our vision is that every learning community is positive, inclusive and resilient. And it's a place where every child, young person, educator and family can actually achieve their best possible mental health. So by joining us today, you're coming along and joining our BU collaborative learning community, where we're connecting with people who are also working to support the mental health and wellbeing of children and young people. Being part of this community means that whole early learning services or schools can actually access BU consultants who can assist you in undertaking your learning that's based on the BU professional learning framework, and also the actions that bring about the changes to promote and prevent early mental health and wellbeing. So I guess the first question that we will ask today is whether or not you know if your service or school is registered, and if you are participating in BU either as an individual or as a school. If you're not, that's fine too. We're more than welcome to have people come along. But if you are interested, please let us know at different points, either in the chat or in the final exit survey that you'll do at the end of the session that you would like to be in contact with us. So before we go much further, I would actually like to hand over to another presenter, our next panellist, Katie Brennan, who will lead us in an Acknowledgement of Country. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Amelia. Thanks very much, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'd firstly like to acknowledge the traditional custodians from the land on which we're all gathered on today, and not only to pay my respects to elders past, present and future, but also those who continue to hold the memories, traditions and ways of being for all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We really do recognise the importance of the continued connection to culture, country and community, and to the health, social and emotional wellbeing of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. And I join you today from the land of the Larrakia people in Darwin in the Northern Territory, and acknowledge and pay my respects to them as the traditional owners of the land on which I work, live and play. And throughout today's webinar, we really do invite you to consider how these ways can support children's wellbeing and are actually informed by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives.
Thanks, Katie. And today's actually quite a special event, because we've almost got the entire Australia represented. Actually, I think we might actually have almost every almost every base covered. We have people. I'm on Kaurna land myself. Maria, whereabouts are you?
I'm in Melbourne on the Wurundjeri land of the Kulin Nations.
Yep, we've got Penny Penny, who's in our chat, who's way down south on the lands in Tasmania, and we've got, so Penny, it'd be great if you and Di, who's up north, can both put the lands that you're on and share them with the teams as well. That would be fantastic. And Maria H, you're about to talk to us about some self-care, but self-care coming from what land are you on today?
So I'm on Whadjuk Noongar land in Western Australia, so I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging of the Whadjuk Noongar people. So yeah, as Amelia said, we're all here today to consider and learn and reflect on the impact of change or critical incidents on the children and families in our care. So while we do this, it's really important that we look after ourselves. A sense of safety, connection and security are crucial for us to experience ongoing mental health. While we talk about periods of change or critical incidents, difficult feelings can arise for any of us, and it might come from our own experiences and from events that we've heard about through the media. So we'll have helplines posted in the chat throughout this webinar, so please use them if you feel like you'd like to talk to someone or if you'd like to access some support. children learn from adults all around them. So being aware of how we look after ourselves and support each other can make a huge difference to each of us, to the wellbeing of our team, and also to the children in our care. So please remember to look after yourselves as we talk about mental health today. So just before we go on, Maria is going to provide some more information about this online space.
Thanks, Maria. Look, for those of you unfamiliar with the webinar platform, this is what your screen will typically look like, with the webinar viewer on the left and the control panel on the right. Throughout the webinar, you can ask questions about using the webinar function, and we'll have some technical support available. You'll see that in the chat. The control panel with the question box is highlighted in blue. The responses in green are public responses, and the ones in red are private responses. You can also use your control panel to manage your phone or computer audio. Today, during the webinar, everyone's going to be placed in listen-only mode, and your microphones have been muted as we've got a large number of attendees. If you're experiencing any other difficulties at any time, please note the customer care details on the screen and in the chat, and contact the team directly. So throughout today, we're encouraging you to get involved as much as you feel comfortable. It's a safe place and everyone's contributions matter. You can ask questions via the chat, the questions box, and we hope to respond to as many of your queries as possible during today's sessions. But for those that we don't get to, we will follow up with these after the event concludes. And I'd just like to acknowledge, as the team in the background, Steph, Dino, Penny and Di, who are taking care of all that. Now, there'll be links going in the chat to resources and references that we use in the content throughout the webinar. These will also be available in the handout that you can download at any time, or along with some reflective questions that you might like to consider within your learning community. And these will also be available post-webinar. We also invite you to participate in the polls we'll be launching throughout the session. And everyone attending this event will be able to access a certificate of participation and a recording of the webinar later. Now, we're also making the attendee list public now for you. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, so let's quickly cover what we're putting in focus today through this webinar. And the title almost says it all. Are you ready? We are really going to be promoting some strategies and some ideas and some things to think about in terms of how we can be prepared for sudden change in our early learning communities or our schools. And this is around what we can do intentionally through our interactions with families, children and each other, but also the documentation, formalising sort of side of things in terms of processes and planning. So we'll be covering 4 main big questions. The first one is around, are you ready? Then how will you actually manage the impact of change? Because we all know any change has an impact of some sort, and for any change, whether it's a sudden change, an unexpected one, or a positive change, they all have a different impact, and there's different consequences. Sometimes they're known consequences, but sometimes there's unintended ones as well. Then we'll also look at how we can actually sustain a mentally healthy community when change occurs, because mentally healthy communities, it's not just about always being happy and healthy and fantastic all the time. It's actually about managing those ups and downs, but Maria will talk about that shortly. And then finally, we'll be looking at what strategies that we can do to sustain the mentally healthy communities after a serious event. For anyone who's actually wanting some more information after this webinar, we have recently run an online conference that the recordings are available. So this virtual conference is called Trauma Informed and Thriving, and it was the foundational premises around that were 5 core principles about what we could do to be trauma-informed in our ways of working and our ways of being. And they really centred around promoting places with safety, showing that there's trustworthiness within communities, offering choice around what we access, how we access it, and what we do in these learning spaces and these community spaces we have. It focuses also around collaboration in terms of working together. There's nothing about anyone without them, essentially, in those sort of spaces. And finally, that leads on to a sense of empowerment and people being able to make those choices and feel comfortable and confident in enacting those ways. So being trauma-informed is a protective factor for mentally healthy communities, and we can do things in our everyday practices and our processes and our philosophies to support that. So, and fundamental, and we will intentionally be doing this today as well, is remembering to reflect on our own well-being and ensure that we're taking measures to promote our self-care, but also the care for others in our spaces. So we will be constantly checking in with you to make sure that you're all okay and you've got plans for if tricky or difficult feelings or thoughts occur. So I've got a couple of questions now for our panellists. The first question is to Katie. Katie, what would you describe a mentally healthy community as?
Thanks, Amelia. Great sort of wrap up of what we're going to cover there today. So a mentally healthy community is one that really models positive behaviours and practices and promotes mental health in all aspects, including policy planning and decision making. And a mentally healthy community I see is also one that promotes that inclusion, healthy relationships and resilience, and we're including families and really encouraging that strong connection across our community as well. And when we're part of a mentally healthy community, we're actually empowering children to feel safe and to really express their emotions and create and be involved in decisions that influence and affect themselves as well. And we know that children in a mentally healthy community actually learn confidently and learn to support their peers, and they ask for support when they need it. And by promoting the importance of self-care across all community members, we're actually supporting those with possible mental health issues or needing any further support to talk openly and to really seek that support. And we do know that a positive approach to mental health can occur in an everyday setting, and in a mentally healthy community, we're supporting a proactive approach to what we call promotion, prevention and early intervention. And I know Maria H., we've talked a little bit about what a mentally healthy community might look like, and Amelia touched on this before, but how do we know how our community is going to need more support?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. So obviously there are going to be times when it's obvious that a community needs support, such as following a critical incident, and we can define a critical incident as an event outside the normal range of experience. So it's something that's sudden, it's unexpected, makes us lose control and involves the perception of a threat to life, or can include elements of physical or emotional loss. So when something like that happens, the need for support is apparent, and we can start to follow those plans or take actions to support our community in the way that we have planned. But sometimes the need for support can be more subtle. So the way people respond to change or to critical incidents isn't always predictable, and our response to an event, either as a community or as individuals, is influenced by our own past experiences and our knowledge and understanding of the event, as well as the risk and protective factors that we've experienced, and we will talk about that a bit more shortly. So, for example, there might be an unanticipated reaction from a community to media stories about an event, and that might come from that community's previous experience of something similar, and the same can be true of individuals. So you don't always know what people's experiences are going to be, and you don't know how they're going to react to different things that are happening in the community. So we need to be really in tune with our community, and we need to be observant and sensitive to those changes, and we need to be curious and ask what's happening for people and discuss what we're seeing. So the greater our connection with the children and families at the service, the more likely we are to notice these changes, and that makes us more able, in a better position, to respond appropriately when we do notice that something's changed for people. So we might just take a moment to consider what we mean when we talk about change. So Maria Curtis, do you want to take that one?
Thanks, Maria. So we want to look at change within the context of your learning community. Change can be defined as an act or process through which something becomes different. Life is full of changes for children and adults, big and small, significant and insignificant, and they happen continuously throughout our lives. Sometimes we don't even notice change, but at other times it can impact us hugely. Change is different for everyone and in every context. Changes can be small, they can be transitions for a young child from one room to another or from service to school. It can be sudden and unexpected staff changes or planned staff changes. It could be new or changing management, unexpected events, accidents. Then we move on to natural disasters and even terrorist incidents that we're seeing in the community from time to time. So the impact of all these different changes will differ from situation to situation and person to person. It depends, as has already been mentioned, on the past experiences that and the experiences learned throughout life. Changes can be traumatic for everyone in the community, either directly or indirectly, but for some, small event might impact hugely on one learning community or on some people, whereas a larger event may not have a great impact. It depends very much on the context. For young children, these changes or traumatic changes, that changes the way they understand the world around them, as they've got much more limited experience about the change. So they don't have that experience to fall back on. So Katie, would you like to talk now about how change can cause stress and why?
Yeah, absolutely. Some great points there as well, Maria. To think about how change really does cause stress, we really need to understand the impacts of change and the fact that, like you mentioned, it really is different from person to person, and the challenges and the stress that change represents is actually really going to be different for all of us. Like you acknowledge, Maria, change looks different for everybody. So it can be small changes, such as a small change in a service, to a really large change. And sometimes these stresses really might seem quite insignificant, but really do come with large challenges for the children in our care as well. And that does cause that greater sense of worry and stress. So it's important that we understand what that looks like for the children in our community. And to maintain that mentally healthy community, we need to understand change and accept that change actually requires emotional organisation. And one really good thing about change is that we are stopping and starting, and we're given that opportunity to really consider how we can approach this. And that reminds me of an author, Pam Link. She wrote a book called Everyday Learning about change. And in that book, she actually said children learn best in a positive, caring relationship, and the effort you put into helping support and teach children during change will be of immense value to them throughout their life. And this really does sum up the significance that change plays in the life of every child. And I know, Maria H., you talked before about the presence of protective factors and how these can actually influence change and the stress around change. Are you happy to talk to us a bit more about that one now?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, when we're talking about children going through change, helping them to develop the skills and to understand and deal with change at that early age will assist them to face new experiences and respond to the events in their life as they grow and encounter lots of different events and challenges. So each of those smaller changes that Maria Curtis was talking about is an experience that they can build on and learn from. So they're all opportunities for us to develop some of those protective factors. So protective factors are influences that reduce the likelihood of poor mental health, either on their own or when risk factors are present. They are strengths or assets that help children maintain positive mental health and well-being and to be really resilient. So by providing as many protective factors in a child's life as possible and reducing those risk factors present, we can help them to cope with those changes. These protective factors can include things like good social and emotional skills, well-developed language and communication, warm and supportive parenting, and secure and trusting relationships with significant people in their life. So a safe and supportive community is a key protective factor for families and communities managing change. So when we're working with children, it's often their behaviours that are the first indication that children might be experiencing some difficulties. So in those instances where we're not sure what's been happening at home or where we're not sure of the impact of an event, children let us know through their behaviour what they're experiencing and feeling. educators are, of course, in a great position to notice the changes in a child's behaviour. So you might notice that their child's become hypervigilant or difficult to settle. They might be clingy, or the other extreme, they might be quite withdrawn. So they might also have difficulty with concentrating or managing their feelings. And there might be changes in the way they're interacting. So you might notice that just their presentation and their interactions are quite different from how they were previously. When you're unsure about their child's behaviour, one tool that you can use to monitor that is our Beatles observation tool. So this is a template for gathering some really clear information about the child's behaviour, emotions, thoughts, learning, and their social relationships. So it helps us to identify patterns or to see changes in their behaviour. And it also provides us a great structure to discuss that with families so that we can look at the best ways to access support. So it's really just starting that conversation about saying that we're noticing that there's some changes. What are some of the things that might be happening in the child's life? What's the other information that you can put together so that you can have a great conversation with parents for them to seek further support, or for you to provide support if that's appropriate. So just thinking more about change, let's consider this now in the context of a critical or serious incident. So I'm going to hand back to you, Amelia, to start that conversation.
Great, thanks, Maria. So far today we've been looking at change in a very broad, general space, and I just want to check in with everyone and make sure you're okay, and have some plans about what you'll do if tricky thoughts do come up, because we are starting to get into a more pointy end now in terms of critical incident and looking at them specifically in terms of how that impacts of change. So with this poll that we're asking, we would like each of you to consider the strategies at your place. So we all have strategies, and these might be documented strategies, or they could be things that have just become the way of working. So in terms of strategies to support mentally healthy communities in your place, which of these are you most aware of? Are you most aware of strategies that help to reduce the risk that is associated with critical incidents? Are you aware of strategies to support you being prepared for the if and when that these things might occur? Do your strategies focus around responding in the best way, or supporting the recovery and sustaining the mentally healthy community during these times and immediately after as well? Or is it all of the above? So take a moment, have a think about it. Have a think about it in terms of which of those things might be documented, which of those things are somehow known, and if there isn't anything that's particularly documented, how do we make sure the whole community is aware and people know what they need to be doing, when and how? So in terms of critical incident though, like Katie, you and I, we had a bit of a conversation earlier. Sometimes in early learning context, critical incidents are also referred to serious incidents. Do you want to unpack that a little bit? And while Dino puts it into the poll so we can see what the results are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Amelia. So while we're just waiting for those results of the poll, I'm happy to share those thoughts we had earlier. So what we were talking about was that when we're defining a critical or a serious incident, what we're actually talking about is where there is an imminent or severe risk to the health, safety and wellbeing of a person or a child in an education and care setting, or within their extended community as well. But what it's really important to consider is that we do have some reporting requirements under the national law and regulations, and it's a critical incident or a serious incident, as it refers to in those circumstances, does refer to the health, safety and wellbeing of a child at your service. And what a service may define as a serious incident may not always fall under those regulatory requirements or the reporting requirements for a serious incident. So it's really important that we actually acknowledge and be aware of what our reporting requirements are as an approved service, yet we also acknowledge the importance that these incidents can occur outside our reporting requirements, and that makes them no less valid. So when we're thinking about a serious or critical incident, we actually need to consider those things as well. So Amelia, I can see we've got the results of the poll up there. Did you want to talk us through those?
So the winner, I guess, if that's how we want to refer to it, everyone says all of the above. That that they are aware of how to support those within their community to maintain mental health, and it's a pretty even spread across the remaining 4 people who know of most well of just one of them. It's really interesting because I was, as the results were up and you were talking with us about the serious incidents, I was thinking in terms of the National Quality Framework and our curriculum frameworks that we can work in, there's a lot of space within those to actually support us in being prepared, and for anyone who's looking to broaden or to ensure that their entire community is aware of all the processes, they're a really good place to start. Another great place to start, of course, is the BU framework. Each of the domains within the framework help provide some steps into those spaces. Maria, Katie, do either of you have any thoughts about the poll results? Just before I get you to answer, though, I do want to also just let everyone know, if you've got any questions at all, please pop them in the chat or in the questions box, and we'll endeavour to answer them too. Maria?
I think all of the above. Some people will have heaps of planning in place and policies and procedures. Other people may not have as much. And I think it will vary from context to context. Those that have experienced any incident or serious incident before will be certainly reviewing and doing things. So I think all of the above, everyone is aware of. It's just the degree of how perhaps their own individual situation and experiences.
Yeah, and I think it's a great opportunity just to start that conversation to make sure that if there are policies and procedures that they are up to date and they're reviewed, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit later on as well, but that people are aware of them, so that maybe check in with the other people in your service, what they're aware of, and how recently things have been updated.
Yeah, thanks. So now we are going to continue looking at critical incident and change as well in a more broader context. We are going to take a bit of a focus now on different areas within our communities. So we'll be looking at it in terms of individual perspectives, in terms of change or serious incidents across a broader community beyond our early learning service or school, or when critical incident or change happens within the context of our early learning community or school. So we've got a conversation now about incidents in our local community. So this is really, this is where we are going to talk about all the things that we can be considering to be prepared for change. Katie, do you want to unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Amelia. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how we can actually prepare for change. So when we're thinking about preparing for change, it's really important that we understand and acknowledge the importance of those strong and purposeful connections and partnerships with families as well, and the way that those partnerships actually really do prepare us for change. And that was something that both Maria H and Maria C mentioned earlier as well. So it's really important that we know that the children do benefit when significant people in their lives collaborate and work together, and that by doing this and developing those partnerships in a really strong context, we're actually supporting the best outcomes for children and for the mental health and wellbeing of those in our learning community. And it also reminds me of the Bronfenbrenner's ecological system model, and the model recognises those multiple influences that really do affect a child's mental health and wellbeing, and this in turn does have that effect on behaviours like Maria H spoke about earlier. And we know that the child is at the centre of the model, and that development occurs within the context of the relationships with families and the learning service and the community in that broader, wider society and community around them, so that the child never actually does act in isolation. And the changes that actually happen around the child really do influence those many aspects of the child's world. And as educators, we're actually really in a great position to support the children in our care and the local community when change really does occur. And in developing and understanding our skills and furthering our knowledge around change, we can actually support them further. So that does mean that when these big or these serious changes do occur, we have a greater idea or a greater understanding of what our response might be.
Yes, thanks for that, Katie. And it really leads into that notion of about how trauma-informed practice is a protective factor during these times, as well as everyday times that we live through. And as you were talking, what I was thinking about quite a lot was how important it is that we're actually to be in tune with other people and in tune with supporting them. We actually need to be in tune with where we are in this space. And Maria, you mentioned a little bit earlier the Beatles observation chart. One of my favourite questions within that is actually stops and asks us as the educators, how are we feeling? How is this impacting on us? In what ways? And that's a really important starting place. So again, we're going to ask people to start from that starting place with us too, in terms of when a big change or a serious incident occurs, what do you think your most likely response would be in those cases? And again, this is a very hypothetical general space. We'd like you to be mindful of how you're feeling as you're answering this, and to take steps to get support if you do need that. But what do you get the sense that your most likely response would be? Understanding that we don't know how we will react in each different situation unless we've actually lived through it in some way. But there is something here. So let's start the poll and consider whether or not you think you go straight away to recognising and regulating your feelings, whether you do always feel prepared, know what to do, whether you get that sense of when you need to seek help and actually seek help if you need it, whether or not you tend to take a step back and keep to yourself a little bit, or whether you do get a sense of feeling overwhelmed and uncertain about where things are going. So have a go at answering those questions. Katie or Maria H or Maria C, either of you wanting to talk a little bit about this?
So I can talk about this a bit, and just to take on from what you were saying, Amelia, that it is so important that we do look after ourselves, and that we are aware of what's happening for us. And sometimes you can get caught up after a critical incident or a natural disaster, and that focus is not on yourself for a little while. So it really is important that you start to think about how you are responding. And we know that the best predictor of child recovery from a critical incident is the recovery of the adults around them. So it's like we talk about the airplane analogy, that we need to apply an oxygen mask to ourselves before we can look after others. In the same way, we need to ensure we care for ourselves and our own mental health, and do what we need to do to recover well in order to be responsive and supportive for the children and families that we're working with in our service. So, and as adults, a large part of our recovery or from change or a critical incident is often through our connections. So your recovery plan might include regular opportunities for your team to come together to connect, or you might like to think about the people that you need to connect with in difficult times. So you might also like to include opportunities for families to connect with each other, because when we support and stabilise families in our communities, that's how we support the children. And when we can support and stabilise early childhood settings or schools, that helps to stabilise and support the community. So it is really important that we're looking after the adults around those children. So I'm not sure if we've got the poll.
The poll up.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. So we'll give people a little bit more time to answer that. But while we're talking about it, we're talking about you were talking about the airplane analogy, which is part of the self-care package within BU. Maria C, there's also some helpful information that's directed for children, but can equally apply in an adult context as well from Emerging Minds. Do you want to explain a little bit about that?
Yes. Look, children are particularly vulnerable to the emotional impacts, and they rely on the adults around them to support and protection and information. And the Emerging Minds website, and it will go in the chat, supports professionals, educators and parents, and it's support children experiencing these difficult situations. It's really worth visiting. There is a trauma toolkit available that talks about trauma-informed care. There's a great video on supporting children immediately after a serious event or incident. And there's the Emerging Minds Psychological First Aid for Children. And when I was looking at this, I'm thinking that a lot of this is actually quite applicable to adults. The first one is ensuring safety, ensuring everyone's safe, ensuring that everyone's keeping calm, connecting with others, as everyone has talked about, encourage self-efficacy, people taking responsibility as much as they can for what they're doing themselves, and having hope. I think this is really important. And again, it's been mentioned before, and is mentioned again on the Emerging Minds website, is the media exposure that can affect people, adults and children. So that Emerging Minds website is a really useful tool for children, for those who are supporting children, but there's a lot there that adults can take on board also.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Maria. It's great to be able to draw those connections and those alignments between what we do for and with children is equally applicable in the space for adults and families as well. And having something like the psychological first aid messaging, or the strategies for being trauma informed, and the processes and things that you have within your workplaces and your organisations really helps to ensure there's consistent messaging, and that help seeking is normalised, and it's communicated that we're there to support each other, and knowing that we need to check in every now and then with each other and ourselves, because as Maria H, you mentioned that sometimes when we're so busy in the responding, it's a little bit after the fact that we start to notice where we're at. So it's great to see that there's a pretty even spread across where people recognise and regulate feelings and feeling prepared and seeking help. In terms of responses related to keeping to yourself and feeling overwhelmed and unsure, sometimes that is it's important to know that that's how we are and how we're behaving in those spaces, but it's also important to know that there are things that we can do across the workplace to support that. And sometimes it's okay to be by yourself. It's around knowing when something is impacting our everyday life and stopping us from doing the things that we normally love to do. So again, I'm going to refer back to the Beatles observation chart, where it talks about behaviours that we have and emotions and thoughts that we have. It's really when things are something that we need to address, it's really about looking at how pervasive and how frequent and how prevalent those behaviours, emotions and thoughts are in our everyday lives. And I think it's also important that if as organisations, as whole learning communities, we have a responsibility to ensure that we're constantly checking in on what and intentionally doing this. What things can we actually be doing in these spaces to promote help seeking and to demonstrate that we are supporting within knowing what our boundaries are with that too. So we're going to move on to the next sort of section now of our webinar, and it's really around the strategies that we can use to create a safe place for families and to reassure it. And I think when we're looking at this within the context of families, we also need to look at it in the context of our co-workers, our colleagues, the people that we see every day who we need to, as a community, we need to be supporting each other and looking out in those space. So, Maria C., do you want to lead this discussion about the strategies that we can be using?
I just wondered if Katie wanted to say anything about
yes,
adult recovery benefits before we move on to that. That was all, just quickly, yeah.
Yes,
absolutely. All good. Thanks very much, Maria. See, we were talking about the recovery in children and families and those connections and how they really do link together. And Amelia, you tied it in really well, bringing in sort of our own well-being and taking care of ourselves at the service, and how that really is a strategy to look after ourselves when talking about the results of the poll as well. So it really does all tie together. But I think it's really important to note that one of the biggest predictors of adult recovery after a critical incident in our community is actually the recovery. So one of the biggest predictors of children in our community after a critical or serious incident is actually the adult recovery. So what we mean by that is that it's so extremely important that we take care of ourselves, both the families in our service, but also ourselves as educators, and that we encourage our parents and families to take care of themselves, because it's your recovery as a trusted adult in a child's life that is actually the biggest predictor that directly benefits the recovery for the child in the community as well. So it's so important. We've talked a number of times today around self-care and what that might look like and how important it is to really consider our own well-being. But it's really important to acknowledge that not only are we benefiting ourselves in developing those strategies, but we're also benefiting the children that we care for as well. So that leads in really well, Maria, to where you're about to talk about. So what are some of those strategies that families can use, or that we can use to reassure them that the service really is a safe place?
Thanks, Katie. Look, some of the strategies that we can use to support families and reassure them, probably the main one is communication between everyone involved, child, family, educators, community. And it's also about consistent messaging about what has occurred and what is happening moving forward on a day-to-day or even a shorter basis. It's also about collaboration between individuals, the educators, the families and the communities. It's about, you've talked about those strong connections, Katie, with families. There's got to be strong positive connections between educators and the families, and also with external service supports, because, you know, communities might need these external supports. You have to utilise all these avenues. Educators and parents, Katie, you touched on working in partnership, can, you know, support children to recover. Parents and educators need to make children feel safe so that children have the opportunity to make sense of what's happened. Children may not be able to stand how they are feeling or why they're behaving the way they are. So they need lots of support and reassurance from parents and educators to help them cope with what's happened. It's about helping them to identify and understand their feelings and their responses to what's happened, because they're usually outside their experience. I guess it's the whole community response, that intentional teaching of social and emotional learning. We've talked about observing children with the Beatles observation tool, and we've talked about that already. Moving forward to formulate a plan in the long term, again, it's going to be about communication, collaboration. It's a whole community process with transparency, so there's going to be the opportunity to develop trust and reassurance, following policies and procedures. And I guess there has to be a responsiveness there somewhere, and a flexibility. Things don't always go according to plan, and you've got to acknowledge individual needs and constant reviewing. And there's heaps of wonderful resources out there. We've already talked about Emerging Minds, and there's the BU Responding Together domain and fact sheets, which will be in the chat. So, you know, and you would constantly review. It's just about, I think the whole thing's about communication and consultation and collaboration. So that probably sums up some of the strategies that are the most basic ones people would use. So Katie, would you like to talk a little bit more about
Yeah, absolutely,
self-care?
Maria. Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good time to remind us when we're thinking about these strategies of that importance of self-care. And we always remember to consider the families and the way that we can support families in our service, to know that it's a safe place, as you talked about, and those strategies and those tools that we've got. But it's also really important that we remember how important it is to take care of ourselves, and that we consider our own self-care and our own well-being. So it's a really good time to once again remind everyone that if you do need any additional support, there are those additional details popped in the chat for you today that you can reach out if that is something you feel you need. And when we're thinking about self-care and well-being, there's actually also a place for this in the National Quality Standards, as Amelia mentioned earlier today. So when we're thinking about our own well-being, we're actually also contributing to the National Quality Standards and our requirements that fall under that as well. And within our professional learning plans, we can really embed some of that self-care as well. And it really is looking at that importance of well-being really does support your team and your colleagues. So by doing that, you are actually addressing a number of these standards in the National Quality Framework as well. And as we're supporting our own well-being, we also acknowledge that everyone is affected in different ways, and we can remember how our self-care and how those experiences really do need that consideration, that during these times and how we manage these things may have a differing impact on people's everyday practice. And I know, Amelia, we've now got another poll, I believe, coming up around supporting those emotions in our everyday practice.
Yes, so as both Katie, both you and Maria were talking, we've put the poll up here, but I was thinking about diversity and how the communication that we have and the practicing of self-care, how we really, there's such a broad scope of how that actually plays out in those spaces, depending on different contexts and the individual circumstances of people. So we are asking people to now consider experiences that they've had or anticipate having in terms of supporting children to regulate and express emotions, and whether or not there are particular emotions that as educators we feel more comfortable and confident in supporting, because like you said, Katie, professional development is actually a process for self-care as well, and this could be an indicator for you of somewhere that you might like to seek more information about how to support perhaps the behaviours you feel less comfortable or confident in supporting. So, but this one is actually asking which ones that you feel most confident and comfortable in supporting. So we'll pop that up. Do either of you have any thoughts about which emotions you feel most comfortable in supporting?
I think just as a general comment, it's often the case that it's easier to support people when their emotions align with your experience. And so I guess it's a bit more challenging if someone's response is quite different from something that you have experienced or that you would experience in that situation. So it's just good to be mindful, I guess, that people are all going to respond with different emotions to different events, and that we need to be aware of what we're feeling at the time.
Yeah, so thanks, Maria. That's a really, really good point, and perhaps consider your responses within the context of what Maria's just said as well. So, Katie, Maria C, do either of you have any thoughts about what's come up in the results of this poll?
Look, I think fear is one that people find quite challenging to discuss, because it's often an unknown. The degree of the fear, the child can't articulate the fear, exactly what it is. So I think people do find that quite challenging. I know I would.
Yeah, thanks, Maria. How about you, Katie?
Yeah, I think along a similar lines as what you just said, Maria C, but leading to anxiety, I'm not that surprised that anxiety is probably one of the lowest there. It is a really challenging emotion to support. So it it is sort of the pole is kind of the way I expect in terms of that happiness and fear and anger, those emotions that we see most often in the children, or we believe we see most often. So it really is about, you know, how can we further develop our own professional learning so that we do feel comfortable supporting that anxiety and supporting fear, so that we can confidently support all those emotions.
Thanks. And I guess an extension of that is even perhaps to layer over the top of the emotions, whether it's externalising or internalising behaviours that potentially we feel more comfortable in supporting, or that we notice that we're supporting in more ways. Moving on though, Maria Curtis, you're going to talk a little bit, you're going to provide us with some myth busters, I think. Is that right?
That's right, yes. Look, there's a mistaken belief, it totally is a myth, that people believe that young children are not affected by trauma and don't even notice or even remember traumatic events. They say the child's too young to be affected, but and so the adults decide not to talk about the incident. But it's often the adults who don't want to talk about it, and not talking about the incident will not support the child's recovery from the incident. If the adults give vague answers or don't say anything at all, or deliberately change the subject when a child brings it up, the children will make up their own version, and often what they imagine may be horrific, far more dreadful than what has actually occurred, and will create far more anxiety than the reality of what happened. If a child starts to talk about an incident, just remember to follow their lead and have a conversation. Answer their questions honestly in language they can understand, but don't give more information than is necessary. Just basic facts. Allow them to go away when they're ready and they've digested what you've told them or response to their question. They'll come back and ask for more. Some children will seem to be recovering and not want to talk, and certainly we don't and let the child be the first one to make the first move. But sometimes it could be months before a child will actually come out and say something. And they may repeatedly tell their story of the incident, you know, over and over and over again. It's important to listen calmly. They may recreate it through play, reenacting what's happening. It's about helping them identify their feelings and name them, encourage them through creative means, drawing, painting, clay, Play-Doh, have books about feelings available, and maintain familiar routines, because talk to the children about any changes that are occurring. The return to normal routines are really, really important for children. And it's important to warn them of any changes because they're very sensitive when an incident has occurred.
Thanks, Maria. And it's certainly a place where people might want to direct more professional learning into this space, because there is there is a fine line between, like you said, how much information we provide at what time, because another thing is we don't want to do any more harm than what's already been done, re-traumatise as well, which sort of leads us into the next conversation with Maria, talking to us a little bit about the resources and things that we should be considering when we are responding and reviewing our response plans.
Yeah, thanks, Amelia. So when I just popped into my mind, actually, one of the phrases I heard about when talking to children about an event is to be truthful and useful. And I just think that's really useful. So, you know, letting people know truthfully what's happened, but making sure that that information is useful and it isn't extending beyond their understanding of the event. So the things that we've been talking about in relation to supporting a community following an incident involving a child would also apply when the incident involves an adult who's connected to the learning community. So both adults and children, as we've just been talking about, need to be given permission and opportunities to talk about change or critical incidents that have occurred. And often we don't discuss things because we're worried that it might have a negative impact on the child or the family. But talking actually helps us to process an event and provides that narrative that Maria was talking about around what has happened. And if we don't have the opportunity to talk about and ask questions and process that information, then that's the sort of thing that can lead to some ongoing issues and concerns, because people will have intrusive thoughts or they may not have understood the event properly. And they're likely, as Maria said, to create their own inaccurate narrative around that event, and maybe even put themselves at the centre or as a cause of an event. So it's really important that we do talk to children about what's happened in the most truthful and useful way we can. And also thinking about when an incident involves an adult connect to the learning community, we need to consider who else is impacted and how we're going to communicate that with our staff and with the families, and then also with the community more broadly if that's relevant. So we need to be mindful that some staff at the service, some of the educators might be impacted themselves, and it might be worth noting that they're not actually in a position to provide a caring role. So we've talked about self-care, but there will be times when it's the impact is actually too great on some particular members of the community, and we can't ask them then to provide a caring role in that situation. So going back to the practicalities, being prepared with an up-to-date plan that includes the contacts and communication strategies, that helps us to be clear with our communication, and having a clear plan is crucial so that everyone knows what actions to take and what their role is going to be, so that we don't have overlaps or we're not missing things. People often think they know what to do and they'll jump in and do things, but if you've actually got a plan and a procedure to follow, that makes it a lot easier. And it can also be useful to think about what resources we might want to gain extra information from or extra support from. So it's important that people know what's available in their local community, but there's also some general resources that we can access. And I think, Maria, you've got some ideas about the different types of resources that people can access online or in their community. Maria?
Yes, sorry. Yes, there's the Stop, Reflect and Act. There's quite a few resources that we looked at, just looking around at your local community, what's available, and again, going back to the Emerging Minds.
Yeah, that Emerging Minds, some amazing resources. And I know, Katie, I think you were talking about the Red Cross one as well.
Yes, yeah.
Katie seems
yeah, absolutely. There's some amazing resources out there. Yeah, my webcam seems to have frozen again, but there are some amazing resources out there that we can find not only from Emerging Minds, but within the BU site, and also Red Cross as well. So certainly a lot out there if you're looking to seek and find more information, for sure.
Yeah, so I guess today we have really broadly covered what we can do to sustain recovery. So it's around supporting educators to develop their mental health knowledge. We've also looked at what sort of place strategic planning has in supporting mentally healthy relationships and communities. We've also really highlighted that we need to take intentional steps to normalise and promote help-seeking behaviours in how we operate, and intentionally teaching social and emotional skills as well as supporting the professional resilience of our educators. And again, that can all be linked back to the National Quality Framework and the National Quality Standard. So we're down to our last 3 minutes. So we're up to taking away some messages. What messages would we take away, each of us? I think for me, probably the big one is that change is so different, and responses to change is so different for each person and each place, and we really need to be guided by how the individuals are experiencing anything in any particular moment. That's my big takeaway. Now, Katie's screen's gone black for me. She's got a takeaway message about being prepared. So, Katie, if
absolutely, I'm still here. Yep.
Cool.
I could not have a stronger internet connection, yet I've decided to black out anyway. But my quick takeaway message is absolutely around being prepared. So when we're thinking about being prepared, we think about what we can actually take away and what we might have gained in the information and our responses to sudden change and critical incidents. And I really hope that in finishing up today that everyone's gained that greater understanding around the strategies that might be required and the reasons why we might need to do those things and why we really need to take that coordinated approach around planning and policies and procedures. What about yourself,
Right.
Maria C?
Look, I just think it's about managing the impact, and it's about recognising and understanding and monitoring both individuals and the whole learning community, and taking that collaborative approach with consistency in communications and messaging. So I think that's important. So what about you, Maria?
Yeah, I think it's really, we're talking about the sustaining the mentally healthy community and returning to a mentally healthy community after an event. So it's really helpful then, and going back to what Katie was saying about the importance of planning, that it's helpful if that planning extends beyond the immediate critical incident or event. So the research has shown that communities can come together during the immediate aftermath of a crisis and feel really connected and really supported and work together really well. And then as time goes on, the recovery can be such a big part of some people's life, whereas other people may have started to move on and think about other things that are happening in their life. So it's really important to recognise that that recovery isn't linear and that it will take a lot of time for some people. So people might look, it can be phasic as well. So people might look like they're recovering really well and then they slip backwards. So just to keep in mind that the planning should involve things that go on for longer than that immediate period. Things that can also remind people of that traumatic event. So it might be that certain smells or being with people or certain locations can bring back those memories, or also significant events like birthdays, Christmas or anniversaries of the event itself. So maintaining that mentally healthy community means understanding that recovery from change or a critical incident can take so much longer than we might expect, and it's not going to be a smooth and easy path, but we will get there.
Thank you so much. We have covered so much territory in 60 minutes, and thank you everyone for joining us today. You will be receiving a certificate of attendance, but please also complete the exit survey. Let us know what your thoughts are that have grown from today's webinar, but also be sure to include the names of anyone who might be watching with you, so we can also provide them with a certificate too. And again, if you're interested in participating or you are participating, remember to keep in touch with us and get in contact via our other events. Our national check-ins are a good place to come along and look at your learning and your action with consultants with BU. So once again, thank you Maria and Katie, and thank you to everyone behind the scenes, Steph, Di, Penny and Dino, for helping today happen, and we look forward to seeing you in the new year. Thank you everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks very much everyone.